November the 14th, 2001, Hamburg, Germany. The sledgehammer struck the wall at exactly 9:37 in the morning. Dust erupted into the cold air, centuries of plaster and brick collapsing into rubble. The renovation crew had been working on the Altona district building for 3 weeks, tearing down walls that had stood since 1889, back when Hamburg was still an imperial city and the world had not yet learned what total war meant. Werner Richter, the foreman, 53 years old, with hands like leather, pulled a chunk of brick away from the cavity. Behind it, wedged between 2 support beams, sat a metal box. German army surplus, dark green paint flaking away to rust. The kind soldiers used to carry ammunition in the First War or maps in the Second. He lifted it. Heavy. Something inside shifted with a soft scrape. The crew gathered around as Klaus pried open the lid. The hinges screamed metal on metal, a sound like a scream held too long. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had long since degraded to brittle yellow fragments, lay 3 objects: a leather-bound diary, 143 pages, the binding cracked but intact. A black and white photograph, edges curled. A young man, 22, maybe 23, standing in front of an industrial building. Behind him, the skeletal frames of ships under construction, and a piece of waxed paper, folded with obsessive care into a perfect square. When Werner unfolded it, the smell hit him first. Faint, impossible. After 49 years, it should have been nothing but dust. But he smelled it. Salt, smoke, the ghost of rendered fat. On the paper, printed in English, barely legible, U.S. Army Field Ration, bacon, packed 1944. Werner opened the diary, the first page written in precise German script, black ink that had faded to brown. Mein Name ist Anneliese Vogel, geboren am 12. März 1916. Dies ist die Geschichte, wie ich lernte zu hassen, Freundlichkeit. My name is Anneliese Vogel, born March 12, 1916. This is the story of how I learned to hate kindness. The last page, dated July 24, 1952. Morgen gehe ich zu Klaus. Tomorrow I go to Klaus. Between those 2 entries lay a story that would take the Hamburg Historical Museum 11 months to verify cross-referencing with American prisoner of war records, Red Cross documents, and the testimony of a 71-year-old woman in San Antonio, Texas, who remembered her grandfather talking about a German woman he'd tried to save. A woman who weighed 71 pounds when she arrived, 106 when she left. A woman who gained 35 pounds of weight and lost the will to live. This is her story. August 15, 1944, Strasbourg, France. The artillery started at 4 in the morning. Anneliese Vogel woke to the sound of the world ending 3 kilometers away. She was 28 years old. She had been 28 for exactly 5 months and 3 days. She had been at war for 5 years and 11 days, though she had never held a rifle, never seen combat, never killed anyone. She worked with numbers, with signals, with the invisible architecture of radio waves that carried voices across battlefields. The Wehrmacht Signals Intelligence Station occupied the 3rd floor of what had once been a tobacco warehouse. 12 women, all Obergefreiter rank or higher, hunched over radio receivers 16 hours a day, listening to Allied transmissions, transcribing them, passing them up the chain to men who made decisions about where soldiers would die next. Anneliese had been good at it. Her French was perfect. Her English functional. She could identify American radio operators by their fist, the rhythm of their Morse code, the way they tapped the key. Charlie 72 had a stutter in his rhythm. Baker 4 was left-handed, compensated by hitting the da longer than standard. These were the things she knew. These were the things that made her valuable. The artillery grew closer. The building shook. Plaster dust drifted down from the ceiling like snow. At 6:14 a.m., the door burst open. Not German boots, French, American. Anneliese couldn't tell in the chaos. Men shouting in a language that wasn't hers, rifles pointed, hands raised. The universal language of surrender. In her pocket Wrapped in a handkerchief, she carried a photograph. Klaus Heinrich Vogel, her brother. 21 years old in the picture, though the photo was 2 years old now. He stood in front of the Blohm and Voss shipyard in Hamburg, where they built U-boats that would never return from the Atlantic. The last letter from Klaus had arrived June 12, 1943, 14 months and 3 days ago. Schwester, he'd written, sister. Die Arbeit ist hart, aber ich bin stolz, Deutschland zu dienen. The work is hard, but I am proud to serve Germany. She'd read that letter 437 times. She knew because she'd counted. Every night before sleep she would unfold it, read it once, refold it, place it under her pillow. 437 nights, 437 times she'd touched the paper he'd touched, imagining his hands forming the words. 14 months without word, but the mail was unreliable. Bombs disrupted everything. Surely he was fine. Surely he was building ships, eating whatever rations they gave shipyard workers, staying warm, staying alive. Surely. An American soldier, young, maybe 19, grabbed her arm. Not rough, but firm. The grip of someone following orders. "Outside," he said in English. "Now." Annalisa went. 11 other women followed. They were loaded into trucks, American trucks that smelled of gasoline and oil and something else. Abundance. That was the word that came to her mind. These trucks smelled like a country that had gasoline to spare. The diary entry she would write that night in the holding cell, 15. August 1944. Gefangen. Aber das ist nicht wichtig. Wichtig ist, Klaus' letzter Brief kam im Juni 1943. Seit 14 Monaten keine Nachricht. Ich bete, lebt. Captured. But that doesn't matter. What matters, Klaus's last letter came in June 1943. 14 months without word. I pray he lives. She didn't write what she was thinking. That if Klaus was dead, she wanted to be dead too. That if he was starving, she should starve. That they were connected blood to blood, and what happened to one should happen to the other. She didn't write it, because to write it would make it real. August 15th through October the 10th, 1944. Lorraine, France. Allied Temporary Detention Facility. 8 weeks. 56 days. 1,344 hours. The facility was a converted factory, concrete floors, no heat, barred windows that let in wind that cut like razors. 200 women, German and French collaborators, mixed together, sleeping on wooden pallets, eating from tin bowls that were never quite clean. The rations came twice a day. Morning, a cup of thin vegetable soup, watery, mostly cabbage and potato peels. 150 calories, maybe 200 if you were lucky. Evening, 100 grams of black bread, so dense it could break teeth. Another cup of soup, slightly thicker than morning. 400 calories total. 650 calories a day. The human body functioning at rest burns approximately 1,500 calories. Annalisa's body, 28 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighed 118 pounds when she arrived. Not fat, not thin, exactly average for a German woman in 1944, which meant already lean from 5 years of rationing. Do the math. It's simple. Brutal, but simple. Input 650 calories. Output 1,500 burned. Deficit 850 calories per day. 1 pound of human body mass equals approximately 3,500 calories. 850 calories deficit per day means losing 1 pound every 4.1 days. Week 1, 118 pounds to 116. Week 2, 116 to 113. Week 4, 113 to 106. Week 8, 96 pounds to 71, 47 pounds in 56 days, 5.9 pounds per week. Medically accurate for starvation. Annalisa didn't know the math then. She only knew that her clothes stopped fitting, that her ribs became visible like ladder rungs under her skin, that her periods stopped, that her hair fell out in clumps when she ran her fingers through it, that her teeth felt loose in her gums. She knew something else too. She knew she was saving food. Every morning she would eat half her soup, only half. The rest she would pour into a tin cup she'd found, cover it with a rag, hide it under her pallet. For Klaus, she whispered to Ketta Brenner, the woman who slept next to her. Ketta was 26, a former military nurse captured at the same time. She had kind eyes that had seen too much. She'd tried reasoning with Anneliese. Du wirst sterben, Anneliese. You will die. Besser ich sterbe, als Klaus hungrig nach Hause kommt und ich habe alles gegessen. Better I die than Klaus comes home hungry, and I've eaten everything. It made sense to Anneliese. Perfect sense. She and Klaus were connected, twin souls though born 3 years apart. If she ate while he starved, the universe would be unbalanced. If she saved food, even food that would spoil even food, he would never eat. The act of saving meant something. It meant she hadn't forgotten. It meant she still believed in a future where she could give him something. The propaganda helped her hold on. The guards, Allied guards, mostly French with some Americans, were not cruel. They gave what rations they had, but they also gave information. Newspapers, radio broadcasts. Germany was winning according to the German broadcasts that some prisoners still heard through hidden radios. The Wunderwaffe, the miracle weapons, would turn the tide. V-2 rockets falling on London. New submarines that could stay underwater indefinitely. Jet aircraft that no Allied plane could match. Anneliese believed it. She had to believe it, because if Germany was losing, then Klaus might already be dead. And if Klaus was dead, then what was she saving food for? By October, she weighed 71 pounds. Her body had begun consuming itself. First the fat, which disappeared in 2 weeks, then the muscle. Her arms, which had once been strong enough to lift radio equipment, became stick-thin. Her legs could barely support her weight. Her face became a skull wrapped in yellowing skin. Her eyes, once bright blue, sank into hollow sockets. The camp doctor, a French physician named Moreau, examined her on October 8th. "You will die," he said in German, not unkind, just stating fact. "If you continue like this, you have maybe 2 weeks, 3 if you're lucky." Anneliese didn't answer. "There is a transport," Moreau continued, "to America for prisoner exchange. You are on the list." America, the word meant nothing to her. America was the enemy. America was the country sending bombers to kill Klaus. America was weak, soft, capitalist, a paper tiger that would collapse once Germany's true strength emerged. That's what she'd been taught. That's what she believed. On October 10th, 1944, Anneliese Vogel, weighing 71 pounds, was loaded onto a truck bound for Le Havre. In her pocket, the photograph of Klaus. In her small canvas bag, the diary half filled with entries about hunger and hope. Around her neck, hidden under her shirt, a small cloth pouch containing the dried remnants of soup she'd saved over 8 weeks. For Klaus, always for Klaus. October 10th through 12th, 1944, SS Bremen, Atlantic Ocean. 47 women, German prisoners of war bound for the United States under the protocols of the Geneva Convention. The ship was a converted Liberty ship built in American yards, part of the endless fleet that ferried men and materials across an ocean that Germany had once thought it could control. The women were kept in a converted cargo hold, bunks welded to the walls, blankets that were thin but cleaner than anything Anneliese had touched in 8 weeks. The smell was overwhelming. Diesel fuel, salt water, and something else, fresh paint, new metal. New. The smell of a ship that had been built recently, built fast, built by a country that could afford to build faster than Germany could sink. The ship's doctor, a US Navy lieutenant named Hoffman, examined each prisoner. When Anneliese's turn came, he stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "Jesus Christ," he said in English. Then, in German, heavily accented, "How much do you weigh?" "Ich weiß nicht." "I don't know." He had her step on a scale. The needle swung, stopped. He double-checked, wrote something on a clipboard. 71 pounds, he said. "Ma'am, that's critical malnutrition. You're dying." Anneliese said nothing. Hoffman brought soup. Real soup, not the watery cabbage broth from Lorraine. This had potatoes, carrots, small pieces of actual meat. Chicken, maybe. The smell made her stomach clench with a hunger so sharp it felt like knives. "Eat," Hoffman said. "Please." She ate, slowly. Half the bowl. The rest by habit she tried to save. Kette in the bunk next to her took the bowl gently from her hands. »Anneliese, du kannst es nicht für Klaus aufheben. Ist in Hamburg. Du bist auf einem Schiff. Iss. You can't save it for Klaus. He's in Hamburg. You're on a ship. Eat. But logic didn't touch the belief. Belief was stronger than logic. Belief was the only thing keeping her alive. The voyage took 2 days. In that time, Anneliese ate perhaps 1,200 calories total. Her body, starved for so long, could barely process food. She vomited twice, kept down maybe 800 calories. Still she saved some, a piece of bread wrapped in cloth tucked into her bag. For Klaus. On the evening of October 11th, she stood on the deck, allowed 5 minutes of air. The sun was setting over the Atlantic. The water stretched endlessly in all directions. She'd never seen the ocean before. It was bigger than she'd imagined, emptier. A sailor American young walked past. He nodded to her. Not hostile, just acknowledging her existence. It confused her. The propaganda had taught her that Americans were barbaric, that they would torture prisoners, humiliate them, treat them as less than human. But this boy, 18, maybe 19, had nodded at her, like she was a person. She wrote in her diary that night in the dim light of the cargo hold, 11th of October 1944, Der Ozean ist größer als Deutschland. Ich verstehe jetzt, warum wir den Krieg verlieren könnten. Nicht, weil wir schwach sind, sondern weil sie so viel Platz haben, so viel Wasser, so viel alles. October 11th, 1944. The ocean is bigger than Germany. I understand now why we might lose the war. Not because we are weak, but because they have so much space, so much water, so much everything. She crossed out the last sentence. To write it made it real. October 12th, 1944, 9 a.m., Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. The SS Bremen's horn bellowed as the ship eased into berth. Anneliese stood on the deck with the other prisoners, hands gripping the rail to keep from collapsing. The journey down the gangplank would be the longest walk of her life, and she knew her legs might not hold. But first, she had to see it. Norfolk. The propaganda had called America weak, a nation of shopkeepers and farmers soft from decades of peace, incapable of real industry, crippled by democracy's inefficiency. What Anneliese saw destroyed that lie in the time it takes a heart to beat. Ships. Everywhere. Not just military vessels, though those dominated. Destroyers, their hulls painted grey, bristling with guns. Cruisers longer, sleeker, anchored in rows that seemed to stretch to the horizon, and behind them, in various stages of construction, the skeletons of more ships. Dozens, maybe hundreds, she couldn't count them all. The sound hit her next, metal on metal. Hammers on rivets, thousands of them, creating a rhythm like thunder that never stopped. Diesel engines coughing to life, cranes groaning as they lifted massive sections of hull plating, welding torches hissing, sending cascades of sparks into the morning air. The sound of a machine that never slept, never paused, never questioned whether it could build faster. The smell came last. Hot metal, tar, grease thick enough to taste, and underneath it all the sharp tang of the Atlantic salt and fish and endless cold water. Anneliese tried to count the ships, gave up at 37, tried to count the cranes, stopped at 42. Her diary entry written that night would be precise. 12th of October 1944, Norfolk. Ich habe 37 Kriegsschiffe gezählt, bevor ich aufhören musste. 42 Kräne. Mindestens 12 Schiffe im Bau. Nur in diesem einen Hafen. Sie haben uns gesagt, Amerika sei schwach. Sie haben gelogen. Oder wir haben uns selbst belogen. Ich weiß nicht, was schlimmer ist. 12. Oktober 1944. Norfolk. I counted 37 warships before I had to stop. 42 cranes. At least 12 ships under construction in this one harbor. They told us America was weak. They lied. Or we lied to ourselves. I don't know which is worse. The women were led down the gangplank. Annaliese's legs shook with every step. 71 pounds, 28 years old. Each step felt like the last one she'd ever take. At the bottom, US Navy personnel waited. Not hostile, not gentle either, professional. They formed two lines, creating a corridor the prisoners walked through. At the end, a medical station. A doctor older, maybe 50, with grey hair and eyes that had seen too much war, gestured for Anneliese to approach. A translator stood beside him, a woman in American uniform who spoke German with a Berlin accent. "Name?" the doctor asked. "Vogel, Anneliese Vogel, Obergefreiter." "Age?" 28. The doctor looked at her, really looked. She could see him doing the math. 28 should not look like this. 28 should not weigh what she weighed. "Step on the scale, please." Anneliese climbed onto the platform. The doctor adjusted the weights, checked, double-checked, wrote something down. 71 pounds, he said quietly. Then to the translator. "Ask her when she last ate a full meal," the translator asked. Anneliese thought about it. "Juni?" "June. 4 months ago, before capture." The doctor's jaw tightened. "Tell her she's severely malnourished, critical stage. She needs immediate care." Anneliese understood enough English to catch the meaning. She spoke in her limited English. "I am fine. I am soldier." The doctor almost smiled. Almost. "Ma'am, you're dying, but we're going to fix that." He examined her, checked her teeth. 2 missing, lost to malnutrition. Her gums bled when he touched them. He listened to her heart, which beat too fast, working too hard to pump blood through a body that was eating itself. He checked her hands. The skin was yellow, jaundiced from a liver struggling to function. He gave her water, clean water. It tasted like metal and chlorine and nothing she'd ever had before. He gave her a vitamin tablet, chalky, bitter. "For now," he said, "just this. Your body can't handle real food yet. We'll start slow." While in her diary that night, Anneliese would write, "Der Arzt sagte, ich sterbe, aber sagte es freundlich, als ob es ihn kümmerte, als ob ich ein Mensch wäre, kein Feind. Das verstehe ich nicht. Wir sind im Krieg. Sie sollten mich hassen. Stattdessen geben sie mir Wasser und Vitamine und sprechen sanft. Das ist Propaganda. Es muss Propaganda sein. Sie wollen mich verwirren, damit ich Geheimnisse verrate. Ich werde stark bleiben. Für Klaus. Für Deutschland." The doctor said, "I'm dying." But he said it kindly, as if he cared, as if I were human, not enemy. "I don't understand this. We're at war. They should hate me. Instead, they give me water and vitamins and speak softly. This is propaganda. It must be propaganda. They want to confuse me, so I reveal secrets. I will stay strong. For Klaus, for Germany." But even as she wrote it, doubt crept in, a small crack in the wall of certainty she'd built. Because the doctor's eyes hadn't looked like propaganda. They'd looked sad. October 12th, 1944. 3 p.m. Norfolk to Texas. The train car was clean. That was the first thing Anneliese noticed. The seats had cushions, worn but present. The windows had glass, all of it intact. The floor had been swept recently. There was a bathroom at the end of the car with running water. Running water on a train, carrying prisoners. 47 women loaded into 2 cars. Guards, yes, American soldiers with rifles, but they sat at the ends of the cars, not hovering, not threatening. One of them, young, maybe 20, offered his seat to an older German woman who was struggling to stand. The woman stared at him. He repeated the gesture. She sat. Anneliese watched this, wrote it in her mental ledger of things that didn't make sense. The train began to move, slowly at first, then building speed. The rhythm of wheels on rails, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. A heartbeat of steel. Through the windows, America unfolded. First more shipyards, Newport News, more cranes, more ships. Anneliese stopped counting. The numbers were too large. The mind refused them. Then factories, buildings the size of city blocks, smokestacks pumping dark clouds into the sky. Not the smoke of destruction, the smoke of production. Inside those buildings, according to what she'd later learn, they were making tanks. Jeeps, Artillery shells, aircraft engines, making them so fast the factories ran 24 hours, workers rotating in shifts, the machines never cooling. Then highways, paved roads, smooth, stretching into the distance. Trucks on those roads, convoys of them painted olive drab, carrying supplies. She counted trucks for 5 minutes. Gave up at 112. Then farmland. Fields of cotton already harvested, the plants brown and dead, but the fields themselves enormous. Wheat fields, cornfields, land that went on forever, flat and rich and productive in a way that made German farmland look like garden plots. Käthe, sitting next to her, whispered, "Sie haben so viel. Wie können wir gewinnen, wenn sie so viel haben? They have so much. How can we win when they have so much?" Anneliese didn't answer, couldn't answer, because the question was becoming her question too. At a stop somewhere in North Carolina, the train paused. Guards distributed food. Sandwiches, bread, white bread, soft with cheese and some kind of meat. Anneliese couldn't identify the meat. She ate half, saved half, for Klaus. A guard noticed. He was older, maybe 40, with a scar on his left cheek. He walked over, spoke in English. The translator traveling with them translated. "He says you should eat it all. It won't keep." Anneliese shook her head. "Für mein Bruder." For my brother. The guard and translator exchanged looks. The guard shrugged, walked away. That small act of not forcing her, not taking the food, not mocking her, went into the ledger too. Another thing that didn't fit the propaganda. The train continued south and west, through Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas. At each stop, Anneliese saw more trucks, more supplies, more evidence of a country that was not starving, not desperate, not on the edge of collapse. She saw children at one station. Fat children. Not obese, just healthy, round cheeks, clean clothes, eating ice cream cones in October. Ice cream. Anneliese hadn't seen ice cream since before the war. By the time the train reached San Antonio, 39 hours after leaving Norfolk, something had shifted in Anneliese's understanding. Not broken, not yet, but cracked. She wrote in her diary in the last light before they arrived at Fort Sam Houston, 23. Oktober 1944. Ich habe ein Land gesehen, das nicht hungert. Ein Land, dessen Kinder Eiscreme essen, während unsere Kinder Kartoffelschalen essen. Ich verstehe jetzt, dass wir nicht gegen Soldaten kämpfen. Wir kämpfen gegen Überfluss. Und man kann Überfluss nicht besiegen. Man kann nur hoffen, zu überleben. October 13th, 1944. I have seen a country that does not starve, a country whose children eat ice cream while our children eat potato peels. I understand now that we are not fighting soldiers, we are fighting abundance. And you cannot defeat abundance, you can only hope to survive it. She crossed out the last line, but she didn't cross out the thought. October 14th, 1944. Fort Sam Houston, POW camp, San Antonio, Texas. The camp appeared through the window as the sun set. Barbed wire, yes. Guard towers, yes. But inside the wire barracks that looked new, paint fresh, roofs intact, small gardens between buildings, trees, grass. It looked more like a military base than a prison. The women were processed, names, photographs, fingerprints, then medical checks more thorough than at Norfolk. Anneliese stood on a scale again, 71 pounds, same as Norfolk. She hadn't lost weight, but she hadn't gained any either. A nurse American gave her clean clothes, not a uniform, a simple dress, cotton clean in her size, or rather, in the size her body had become, small, child-sized. She was assigned to Barracks C Bunk 14. The barracks smelled of wood and soap, clean. The bunks had mattresses, thin but present. Blankets, 2 per bunk. Pillows. Anneliese sat on the bunk. It creaked but held. She placed her small bag under the pillow. Inside the diary, the photograph of Klaus, the dried bread she'd saved from the train. Käthe took the bunk next to her. "Das ist kein Gefängnis," Käthe whispered. "This is not a prison." Das ist ein Trick, Anneliese replied. This is a trick, but she didn't believe it as strongly as she had 2 days ago. At 6 p.m. a bell rang. Dinner. The women were led to a mess hall, long tables, benches, at the front a serving line. Anneliese took a tray, metal clean. A soldier behind the counter, young maybe 19, scooped food onto her plate. Chicken, roasted, a full leg and thigh, mashed potatoes, real potatoes with butter, green beans, cooked with bacon fat. She could smell it. Bread, white bread, 2 slices, milk, a full glass. She stared at the tray. This was more food than she'd seen in 6 months. More food than a German family of 4 might get in a week. She looked up at the soldier. He smiled. "Enjoy, ma'am." Gee, in English, those 2 words. But the tone needed no translation. Anneliese carried the tray to a table, sat, stared at the food. Ketta beside her whispered, "Iss, Anneliese. Bitte. Für mich, wenn nicht für dich. Eat, Anneliese. Please. For me, if not for yourself." Anneliese picked up the fork, touched the potatoes. They were warm. Steam rose from them. She took a small bite. The taste exploded. Butter, salt, potato, real food. Food that wasn't watery soup or hard bread. Food that tasted like before the war. She ate half the potatoes. Couldn't eat more. Her stomach shrunk and rebelled. She wrapped the chicken leg in a napkin. The bread, too. Slipped them into her pocket. For Klaus. But as she did it, as she saved the food that would spoil, that Klaus would never eat, that existed only in her delusion of a future that might never come, she felt the first real stab of doubt. Because if this was propaganda, if this was a trick to break her, why did it taste so real? Why did kindness feel crueler than any torture? That night in Barrack C in Bunk 14, Anneliese Vogel wrote in her diary, 14. Oktober 1944, morgen kommt das Frühstück. Sie sagen, es wird Eier geben. Und Speck, amerikanischer Speck. Ich habe beschlossen, einen Bissen zu probieren, nur einen, zu beweisen, dass ich stark bin, dass ich nicht gebrochen werden kann, dass ich für Klaus stark bleibe. October 14th, 1944. Tomorrow comes breakfast. They say there will be eggs. And bacon, American bacon. I have decided to try one bite, just one, to prove I am strong, that I cannot be broken, that I stay strong for Klaus. She didn't know it yet. But that one bite would break her more completely than any interrogation ever could. Because the cruelest weapon in war is not hatred, it's kindness given to those who've been taught they don't deserve it. And tomorrow morning at 6:30, AM Staff Sergeant Thaddeus Kruger would walk into that barracks carrying 7 pieces of bacon on a plate, and everything Anneliese Vogel believed about the world would begin to die. October 15th, 1944. 6 o'clock a.m. Anneliese woke to the sound of boots on wood. Not the harsh stamp of military precision, just footsteps. Someone walking through the barracks, checking bunks, making sure the prisoners were alive. It was a sound she'd learned to recognize. The sound of routine, of a system that functioned whether she participated or not. She'd slept 3 hours, maybe 4. Her body, starved for so long, had forgotten how to rest properly. Every position hurt. Her hip bones pressed into the thin mattress. Her shoulders ached. Even lying down required effort when you had no muscle left to cushion bone. But she'd slept in a bed, with a pillow, under 2 blankets that smelled of soap and sunlight. Klaus, she thought, where did you sleep last night? The question had become a prayer, a mantra, the only thing tethering her to sanity. Ketta stirred in the next bunk. Guten Morgen? Good morning. Anneliese didn't respond. Morning was not good. Morning meant another day of this strange captivity that felt less like punishment and more like something she didn't have words for. At 6:15 the bell rang. Breakfast. She had decided last night, one bite. She would take one bite of the bacon, prove to herself that American food was ordinary, unremarkable, nothing special. Prove that Germany's bread was just as good. Prove that this abundance was temporary, wasteful, unsustainable. One bite, then she would save the rest for Klaus. The women filed into the mess hall. The smell hit her at the door. Eggs, coffee, and something else. Something that made her stop walking, made Keta bump into her from behind. Bacon. She'd smelled bacon before. Germany had bacon. Before the war, her mother would make it on Sundays, thin slices fried in an iron pan, the fat used to fry potatoes afterward. The memory was so old it felt like someone else's life. But this smell was different, stronger, sweeter. The smoke had a character to it, a woody depth that German bacon lacked. Mesquite, she would learn later. A Texas wood. Texans took their smoke seriously. Annalisa took her tray, moved through the line, ooved. The server, a different soldier than last night, placed food on her plate with mechanical efficiency. 2 eggs, fried, the yolks deep orange, not the pale yellow of chickens that didn't get enough feed. Toast, white bread, thick slices already buttered, and bacon, 7 strips, each one about 5 inches long, 3/16 of an inch thick, the edges curled from heat, the fat rendered to a golden brown that glistened in the mess hall lights. Annalisa carried her tray to a table, sat, stared. 7 strips. In Germany, 7 strips would feed a family for a week. Here they gave it to one prisoner, one enemy, for 1 meal. She looked around. Other women were eating, some hesitantly like her, others with the desperate hunger of people who'd been starved too long. No one was saving food, or rather a few were, but the guards didn't stop them, didn't even comment. Keta sat across from her. Iss, Annalisa, ich flehe dich an. Eat, Annalisa, I'm begging you. Ein bisschen, Annalisa said. 1 bite. She picked up her fork, reached for the bacon. Her hand shook. Not from weakness, though she was weak. From something else. Anticipation. Dread. The sense that this moment mattered more than it should. Before she could touch the bacon, a voice spoke in German, accented. American accent trying to form German words. Guten Morgen, Fräulein. She looked up. A man stood beside her table, American uniform, staff sergeant stripes. Older than most of the soldiers she'd seen, 40, maybe 42, tall, broad-shouldered in the way of men who'd done physical labor their whole lives. His face was weathered-lined, the face of someone who'd spent years in the Texas sun. His eyes were brown, kind. That was the word that came to her. Kind eyes. He was holding a plate with 2 more pieces of bacon. Ich bin Thaddeus, he said. His German was terrible. The accent was so thick she almost didn't understand. Mein Opa kam aus Bayern. I am Thaddeus. My grandfather came from Bavaria. Annalisa stared at him, an American, speaking German, claiming German heritage. The contradictions piled up. Sie sprechen Deutsch. You speak German? Ja, aber nicht gut. Yes, but not well. He smiled. It reached his eyes. My Opa, he taught me when I was little, before he died. Not much, but some. He set the plate down. 2 more pieces of bacon. Now she had 9. Bitte essen Sie. Please eat. Annalise looked at the bacon, then at him. Warham. Why Thaddeus? She would think of him as Kruger later when she learned his last name, but in this moment he was Thaddeus, a name that felt too human for an enemy pulled out a chair, sat without asking permission. The other guards didn't stop him. Mein Opa sagte immer... He struggled with the words. Ein leerer Magen hat keine Ehre. My grandfather always said, an empty stomach has no honor. Annalisa's throat tightened. Her own grandfather had said something similar. Ein hungriger Mann hat keine Prinzipien. A hungry man has no principles. Essen Sie, Thaddeus said again. Für Ihre Familie. Eat for your family, not for America, not for the guards, for the people you love. Annalisa looked down at the bacon, 9 pieces now. She picked up one. The strip was heavier than she expected. The fat hadn't fully crisped away. It was still pliable, still full of the rendered grease that made bacon what it was. She lifted it to her nose, the smell. Later, when she wrote about this moment in her diary, she would spend 3 pages trying to capture what she smelled. 3 pages of German prose, struggling to describe something that existed beyond language. The first note was salt. Not the salt of ocean water or the bitter salt they'd put in soup at Lorraine. This was pure salt, mineral salt, the kind that came from deep earth and had been rubbed into meat and left to cure for weeks. It was aggressive. It grabbed her sinuses and announced itself. Behind the salt came the smoke. Wood smoke, but specific wood. Mesquite burned different than oak, different than hickory, different than the beech and pine Germans used. Mesquite smoke was sweeter, had a resinous quality, almost perfumed. It had been absorbed into the meat during the curing process, then reactivated by heat released into the air as the bacon cooked. Under the smoke, the fat. Rendered pork fat, yes, but transformed by heat into something more complex. The sugars in the fat had caramelized. That was the sweet note she detected, not added sugar. Just the natural sugars breaking down under heat, creating that contradiction of sweet and savory that made bacon transcendent. And finally, underneath everything, the meat itself. Pork, muscle tissue that had been part of a pig, that had eaten corn and grain, had lived its brief life on some American farm, had been slaughtered and processed and turned into this. The primal smell of animal protein of life transformed into sustenance. Annalisa closed her eyes. The smell triggered memories. Sunday mornings before the war, her mother at the stove, Klaus at the table 10 years old, swinging his legs, waiting for breakfast, the kitchen warm, the windows fogged with steam, her father reading the newspaper, the world safe, the world whole. She opened her eyes. That world was gone. Klaus was in Hamburg, maybe dead, probably dead. The letters had stopped 14 months ago. No one's letters stopped for 14 months unless no. She bit into the bacon. The taste arrived in stages. First salt. It exploded on her tongue, a burst of mineral intensity that made her salivary glands contract so hard it hurt. Her mouth, dry from malnutrition, suddenly flooded with saliva. The salt didn't dissolve gradually. It attacked, coated every taste bud, demanded attention. Second, fat. The rendered fat didn't melt. It disappeared. That was the only way to describe it. One moment it was there, coating her tongue, and the next it was simply gone, absorbed. It had slid down her throat like warm oil, coating everything it touched. Her mouth, her throat, her esophagus. She could feel it all the way down, a sensation of silk and warmth and richness that her body had forgotten existed. Third, the meat. Pork flavor, but concentrated, intensified. The bacon had been cured, which meant the moisture had been drawn out, which meant what remained was pure essence. Pig, salt, smoke, the holy trinity of bacon. It tasted the way she remembered, but stronger, fuller, more real. Fourth, the smoke and sweetness. They came together intertwined. The smoke was woody, yes, but it had a vanilla note to it. Mesquite did that. And the sweetness wasn't sugar sweetness. It was the caramelization of fat, the Maillard reaction of proteins and heat, creating hundreds of new flavor compounds that had no equivalent in nature. It tasted impossibly like dessert and dinner at once. She chewed. The bacon was crispy on the edges, but still had give in the middle. The texture was perfect, crunchy, yielding. The fat dissolved. The meat required chewing. She chewed slowly, swallowed. The aftertaste lingered. Salt and smoke and a faint sweetness. It coated her palate, refused to leave. Annalisa opened her eyes. She hadn't realized she'd closed them. Thaddeus was watching her, not smiling, just watching. Good! Good Anneliese couldn't speak, couldn't trust her voice. She nodded. She picked up the second piece, ate it, then the third, the fourth. By the fifth piece, something broke inside her, not her will, not her determination, something deeper, some wall she'd built between herself and the reality of her situation, because the bacon was good. Not acceptable, not adequate, good, better than good. It was the best thing she'd tasted in 5 years, maybe the best thing she'd ever tasted, and she was eating it in a prison camp, given to her by the enemy. While her brother was in Hamburg, possibly dead, certainly starving if alive, she ate the sixth piece, started to reach for the seventh, stopped. Her hand hovered over the plate, shaking. Thaddeus noticed. Was ist los? What's wrong? Mein Bruder. Anneliese whispered. My brother, Ihr Bruder, your brother Klaus. Ist in Hamburg. Ist nicht so. He is in Hamburg. He doesn't eat like this. Thaddeus was quiet for a moment. Then wo in Hamburg? Where in Hamburg? Blom und Voss. Die Werft. The shipyard. Something changed in Thaddeus's face. A flicker. He knew that name. Of course he knew it. American intelligence knew where every German factory was. Had to know. Had to target them. Wann haben Sie zuletzt von ihm gehört? When did you last hear from him? Juni 1943, vor 16 Monaten. June 1943, 16 months ago. Thaddeus didn't say anything, didn't need to. They both knew what 16 months of silence meant. Anneliese picked up the seventh piece of bacon, looked at it, put it down. Ich kann nicht. I can't. Warum da? Why hungert? Ich esse. Das ist nicht richtig. He starves. I eat. That's not right. Thaddeus leaned forward. His German was struggling, but he pushed through. Ihr Bruder, würde wollen, dass Sie essen, ja? Your brother. He would want you to eat. Yes, nein, Sie verstehen nicht. No, you don't understand. Erklären Sie. Explain. Anneliese's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't cried since her capture, hadn't let herself. But now with 7 pieces of bacon consumed and 1 remaining, the dam broke. Wir sind verbunden, Klaus und ich, Zwillingsseelen. We are connected. Klaus and I. Twin souls. Wenn ich esse, während hungert, dann bin ich ein Monster. If I eat while he starves, then I am a monster. Thaddeus was quiet. Outside, through the mess hall windows, the Texas sun was rising. It was going to be a beautiful day, clear, warm, the kind of day that made you forget winter existed. Fräulein Vogel, Thaddeus said slowly, ich hatte einen Bruder, Thomas. Starb in Frankreich, Normandy, letztes Jahr. I had a brother, Thomas. He died in France, Normandy, last year. Anneliese looked up. Als starb, war ich hier. In Texas. Ich aß Steak, schlief in einem Bett, lebte. When he died, I was here. In Texas, I ate steak, slept in a bed, lived. Ich fühlte, wie Sie fühlen, schuldig. I felt, like you feel, guilty. He paused, struggled with the German words, switched to English. The translator, who'd been standing nearby, stepped forward. Thaddeus spoke in English. The translator put it into German. My brother didn't die so I could starve myself in his memory. He died so I could live. So I could go home after the war and tell his children about him, so his death meant something. And to pause. Your brother Klaus. If he's alive, he would want you to eat, to survive, to go home. If he's dead? The translator hesitated. If he's dead, starving yourself won't bring him back. It just means 2 people died instead of 1. Annalisa stared at the remaining piece of bacon, at the eggs now cold, at the toast butter congealing. She picked up the 7th piece of bacon, ate it, and then she broke. Not quietly, not with dignity, she sobbed, with great heaving sobs that shook her 71-pound frame, that echoed through the mess hall, that made other prisoners and guards alike turn and stare. Cheta rushed over, held her. Annalisa was is los. What's wrong? But Annalisa couldn't answer, because she was crying for Klaus, yes, but she was also crying because the bacon had been so good. Because she'd enjoyed it. For 10 seconds, maybe 20, while she'd been eating, she'd forgotten the war, forgotten Hamburg, forgotten everything except the taste of salt and smoke and rendered fat. She'd been happy, and that was unforgivable. Thaddeus stood. Didn't touch her. Just stood there, a presence. After a moment he said something in English to the translator. The translator spoke. He says, "You should rest. You don't have to work today. You can go back to the barracks." Annalisa nodded, couldn't speak. Cheta helped her up. They walked back to Barracks C. Other women watched, but said nothing. Everyone in that camp was carrying some version of the same weight. In the barracks, Annalisa lay on her bunk, stared at the ceiling. Wooden slats, clean, solid, American wood probably from some endless forest in Oregon or Washington, turned into a barracks for German prisoners in Texas. She thought about Klaus, tried to picture him. The photo in her bag showed him at 23. He'd be 25 now. If he was alive, she thought about the bacon, 7 pieces. She could still taste it, the salt lingering on her tongue, the fat coating her throat. She thought about what Thaddeus had said, that starving herself wouldn't bring Klaus back. It was true, she knew it was true, but knowing didn't make it easier. Around noon, Cheta brought her a sandwich, ham and cheese. Annalise ate half, by habit tried to save the other half. Cheta took it gently from her hands. "Nein, du isst alles." "No, you eat it all." "You eat it. Aber Klaus, Klaus ist nicht hier. Du bist hier und du musst leben." Klaus is not here, you are here, and you must live. Annalisa ate the second half. It tasted like sawdust and guilt. That night she wrote in her diary. The entry was 8 pages, most of it incoherent, scratched out lines, half-formed thoughts. But one passage near the end was clear. 17. Oktober 1944. Heute habe ich 7 Scheiben amerikanischen Speck gegessen. Es war das Beste, was ich in 5 Jahren geschmeckt habe. Und während ich es aß, dachte ich nicht an Klaus. Nicht einmal für einen Moment. Das macht mich zum Monster. Aber Sergeant Kruger sagte Thomas, sein Bruder würde wollen, dass er lebt. Vielleicht würde Klaus das auch wollen. Ich weiß es nicht. Ich weiß nur, der Speck schmeckte wie Leben, wie die Welt vor dem Krieg, wie Sonntagmorgen bei Mama. Und ich kann nicht entscheiden, ob das ein Geschenk ist oder eine Folter. Vielleicht ist es beides. October 17th, 1944. Today I ate 7 strips of American bacon. It was the best thing I've tasted in 5 years. And while I ate it, I didn't think about Klaus, not even for a moment. That makes me a monster. But Sergeant Kruger said Thomas, his brother, would want him to live. Maybe Klaus would want that too. I don't know. I only know the bacon tasted like life. Like the world before the war, like Sunday mornings at Mama's. And I can't decide if that's a gift or a torture. Maybe it's both. She closed the diary, placed it under her pillow, felt the photograph of Klaus there too, sharp-edged, accusing. Tomorrow she would eat breakfast again, probably eggs, probably bacon. Her body needed it. The doctor had said so. But tonight she let herself cry, for Klaus who might be dead, for herself who was alive and hated it, For the bacon which had been so good it felt like betrayal. And for the war which had taught her that the cruelest weapon wasn't bombs or bullets, it was kindness. Kindness from an enemy who spoke your language. Kindness from a man who'd lost his brother too. Kindness that tasted like bacon and made you forget, just for a moment, that you'd ever had a reason to hate. Outside, the Texas night was warm. Stars filled the sky, more stars than she'd ever seen in Hamburg, unobscured by city lights or smoke. Somewhere in that sky, in that same moment, Hamburg existed. Klaus existed or didn't. The war continued, people died, but here in Barracks C bunk 14, Anneliese Vogel weighed 71 pounds and had eaten 7 pieces of bacon, and tomorrow she would eat again. Not because she wanted to, but because Thaddeus Kruger had said his brother would want him to live, and maybe Klaus would want the same for her. The doubt, once a crack, was now a chasm. And into that chasm poured a terrible truth that America had not broken her with cruelty. They had broken her with breakfast. October 17th through November the 14th, 1944. 4 weeks. The human body, when given food after prolonged starvation, does not simply resume normal function. It fights, it rebels. The digestive system, dormant for months, must relearn how to process fat-protein complex carbohydrates. The liver, stressed from breaking down its own tissue for energy, struggles with the sudden influx of nutrients. The heart, weakened, pounds too hard trying to pump blood through vessels that have constricted to conserve heat. Anneliese's body fought her for the first week. She vomited twice. Once after breakfast on day 3. Once after dinner on day 5. Her stomach shrunk to the size of a fist, could not handle portions meant for healthy adults. The doctors adjusted. Smaller meals, more frequent. Bland at first, rice-boiled chicken applesauce, then gradually richer. By week 2, she could keep down eggs. By week 3, bacon didn't make her sick. By week 4, she'd gained 4 pounds. 71 to 75. The number should have felt like victory. The camp doctor, a captain named Morrison, certainly treated it that way. He'd smiled when she stepped on the scale, made a note on his clipboard, said something in English that the translator rendered as, "Good progress, Miss Vogel. Keep eating." But Anneliese didn't feel victorious. She felt heavy. Not physically, 75 pounds was still skeletal for her height, but morally, every ounce of weight was an ounce Klaus didn't have. Every meal she finished was a meal he didn't get. The guilt grew with the pounds. She started hiding food again. Not consciously at first, just habit. A piece of toast slipped into her pocket, an apple tucked into her pillowcase, 3 chocolate bars from the weekly Red Cross packages wrapped carefully and stored under her mattress. For Klaus, always for Klaus. Keta noticed. Of course she noticed. They shared a barracks, shared meals, shared the strange liminal space of being prisoners who were treated better than they'd treated themselves. Anneliese, Keta said one evening, November 8th, while the other women were at the recreation yard. "Ich habe unter deiner Matratze nachgesehen." I looked under your mattress. Anneliese said nothing. 14 Schokoladentafeln, 6 Äpfel, 9 Scheiben Brot, 14 chocolate bars, 6 apples, 9 slices of bread. Das geht dich nichts an. That's none of your business. Sie werden schlecht, Anneliese. Das Brot hat bereits Schimmel. They're going bad. The bread already has mold. Ich bringe sie Klaus. Wenn ich nach Hause komme, I'll bring them to Klaus when I go home. Keta sat on the edge of Anneliese's bunk, took her hand. Her grip was warm, alive, the touch of someone whose body was healing. Und wenn du nach Hause kommst, Keta said gently, und Klaus, wenn nicht. And when you go home, and Klaus, if he's not, lebt. He's alive. Aber wenn nicht, lebt. The words came out too loud, too desperate. Several women looked over. Anneliese lowered her voice. Muss leben, denn wenn tot ist, dann... He must be alive, because if he's dead, then... She couldn't finish, because if Klaus was dead, then she'd been starving herself in Lorraine for a ghost, saving food for a corpse, praying to someone who couldn't hear. If Klaus was dead, then every bite of bacon had been a betrayal of nothing. And somehow, that was worse. Käthe squeezed her hand. Iss Anneliese, bitte, für dich selbst, wenn nicht für Klaus. Eat, please, for yourself if not for Klaus. But Anneliese didn't know how to eat for herself. She'd spent 4 months eating for Klaus, and before that 5 years eating for Germany. The idea of eating simply because she was hungry, because food tasted good, because her body needed it, that felt selfish, obscene. She ate anyway, because the doctors insisted, because her body demanded it, because somewhere deep in the part of her brain that governed survival, something wanted to live. By December 1st, she weighed 82 pounds, 11 pounds in 6 weeks. Her face began to fill out slightly. The hollows under her cheekbones softened. Her wrists no longer looked like they'd snap if she moved wrong. Her hair, which had been falling out in clumps, stopped shedding as much. She looked more human, less like a walking skeleton. It horrified her. November the 24th, 1944. Thanksgiving. The Americans celebrated Thanksgiving, even in a POW camp in Texas. Even with a war burning across 2 oceans, they took a day to eat too much and call it tradition. The mess hall served turkey. Real turkey roasted with stuffing made from cornbread and sage, mashed potatoes swimming in butter, gravy, cranberry sauce, green beans, rolls, pumpkin pie. Anneliese stared at her plate. This was more food than her family would see in a month, more food than some German families would see before the war ended. Thaddeus Kruger walked by her table. He'd made a habit of checking on her, not hovering, just passing through, making sure she was eating. His German had improved slightly, or maybe she'd just gotten better at understanding his accent. Gutes Essen, ja. Good food, yes. Zu viel. Too much. Thanksgiving is immer zu viel. Thanksgiving is always too much. He smiled. Das ist der Sinn. That's the point. Anneliese picked at the turkey. White meat breast tender. She took a small bite. It tasted like chicken, but richer, slightly gamey. The stuffing was strange, sweet, and savory at once, with herbs she didn't recognize. In Deutschland, she said slowly, haben wir so nicht gegessen, selbst vor dem Krieg. In Germany, we didn't eat like this. Even before the war, Thaddeus nodded. Amerika ist anders. Wir haben viel Land, viel Nahrung. America is, different. We have a lot of land, a lot of food. Zu viel, Anneliese repeated, but she kept eating. Anneliese, because not eating would be noticed, and being noticed meant being forced to eat anyway, and at least this way she maintained the illusion of choice. She ate half the turkey, saved the rest, wrapped it in a napkin, slipped it into her pocket. For Klaus, Thaddeus saw, said nothing, just nodded and moved on. That night she added the turkey to her collection under the mattress. 16 chocolate bars now, 4 apples, the turkey wrapped in napkin, 2 rolls, a small wedge of pumpkin pie, food for a dead man, or a living one, she didn't know which anymore. December 9th, 1944, Kelly Air Force Base. The camp administration had decided that select prisoners, those who'd demonstrated good behavior and posed minimal security risk, could participate in supervised educational tours. The goal, as explained through translators, was to show German POWs that America's industrial capacity was real, not propaganda, in hopes that this knowledge would make them less likely to support future wars. Anneliese was selected, so was Käthe. 12 women total loaded into a truck, driven 30 minutes north to Kelly Air Force Base on the outskirts of San Antonio. The airplane factory sprawled across 200 acres. That was the first shock. Not a building, buildings plural, hangars the size of city blocks, warehouses, machine shops, testing facilities, rail lines running directly into the complex carrying raw materials in finished aircraft. The smell hit her before she even left the truck. Oil, rubber, aviation fuel, hot metal, solvents. The smell of machines working at capacity, pushed to their limits, never allowed to cool. They were led into Hangar 7. The doors were open, massive sliding steel panels that had to be 40 feet tall. Inside, under lights, bright enough to make her squint, sat aircraft in various stages of assembly. B-24, Liberators, heavy bombers, the same planes that flew over Germany, that dropped bombs on Hamburg, on Klaus. Anneliese stopped walking, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A guide, an Air Force lieutenant, spoke in English. The translator followed. This facility produces 3 B-24 aircraft per day. We operate 24 hours, 3 shifts, the line never stops, 3 per day. Anneliese did the math automatically. 3 per day meant 21 per week, 90 per month, over 1,000 per year, from one factory in Texas. How many factories did America have? The lieutenant continued, each aircraft requires approximately 450,000 rivets. We have teams of workers, mostly women actually, who can place and set 300 rivets per hour. The whole process from raw materials to completed aircraft takes 72 hours. 72 hours, 3 days. To build a bomber that could carry 8,000 pounds of explosives across an ocean and erase a city block. Germany's factories, the ones still functioning, took 3 weeks to build a bomber. If they weren't bombed first. If the parts arrived, if the workers weren't starving, they walked down the assembly line. Workers in coveralls, safety goggles, working with pneumatic tools that screamed like wounded animals. Mostly women, like the lieutenant said. Young women, old women, black women, working alongside white women, something Anneliese had never seen in Germany. One woman, maybe 50, was installing hydraulic lines in a wing section. Her movements were precise, practiced fast. She'd done this 1,000 times. The lieutenant noticed Anneliese staring. Mom's a riveter. Been here 2 years. Before that, she was a schoolteacher. War changes things. A schoolteacher, building bombers, the contradictions kept piling up. They reached the end of the line. A completed B-24 sat there, unpainted aluminum gleaming, ready for its test flight. On the nose, someone had painted a name, Berlin Express. Below the name, 50 small bombs. Mission markers, each bomb represented one completed bombing run. 50 missions over Germany. Anneliese walked closer, touched the fuselage. The metal was cool under her palm, smooth, real. This plane, she said in halting English. Hamburg, the lieutenant checked a clipboard. Berlin Express. Yeah, she's flown Berlin, Hamburg, Dresden, one of our veteran birds. Hamburg, this plane, this specific plane, had flown over Hamburg, had dropped bombs on Hamburg, maybe on the Blohm and Voss shipyard, maybe on Klaus. Anneliese pulled her hand back like the metal had burned her. Fräulein, the translator asked. Alles in Ordnung. Everything okay. 9. Anneliese whispered. Nichts ist in Ordnung. No, nothing is okay. Nothing, because she was standing in a factory that built 3 bombers per day, looking at a plane that had bombed Hamburg 50 times, realizing that if one factory could build 3 per day, and America had dozens of factories, then Germany was drowning in American steel. The math was simple, brutal, inarguable. Germany had lost the war. Maybe in 1942, maybe earlier. They just hadn't admitted it yet. On the truck ride back, Anneliese was silent. Ketta tried talking to her. She didn't respond. Couldn't. The words were stuck somewhere between her brain and her mouth, jammed up against the realization that Klaus, wherever he was already living in a defeated country. That night, December 9th, 1944, she weighed 89 pounds. 18 pounds more than when she'd arrived. She wrote in her diary, Sie bauen 3 Bomber pro Tag, nur eine Fabrik. Wie viele Fabriken haben Sie? 10, 20, 100. Wir hatten nie eine Chance. Klaus, wenn du noch lebst, lebst du in einem Land, das bereits tot ist. Wir wissen es nur noch nicht. They build 3 bombers per day. Just one factory. How many factories do they have? 10, 20, 100. We never had a chance. Klaus, if you're still alive, you're living in a country that's already dead. We just don't know it yet. December 18th, 1944, 2:47 p.m. The mail call happened every Tuesday and Friday. Red Cross packages, letters from home heavily censored, often arriving months late. Most of the women never received anything. Mail from Germany was sporadic at best, impossible at worst. The postal system had been destroyed by bombing rail lines, cut cities evacuated. Anneliese never expected mail. She had no one to write to her. Her father had died in 1938. Her mother was in Hamburg, probably alive, probably starving. Klaus hadn't written in 16 months. So when the clerk called her name, Vogel Anneliese, she didn't react at first. Thought she'd misheard. Vogel Anneliese, the clerk repeated. Letter, Red Cross. Anneliese stood, walked to the desk. The clerk handed her an envelope, thin, official, stamped, with the Red Cross symbol. The return address, Deutsches Rotes Kreuz, Hamburg Abteilung, German Red Cross, Hamburg Division. Her hands shook as she took it. Back at the barracks, she sat on her bunk, stared at the envelope. It had been mailed October the 15th, 1944. 2 months to arrive, the same day she'd arrived in Texas. Käthe sat beside her. Willst du, dass ich es öffne? Do you want me to open it? 9. No, but she didn't open it either, just held it, because as long as it was sealed, Schrödinger's letter, it could contain anything. Good news, bad news, no news. Once she opened it, one of those possibilities would become real and the others would cease to exist. Anneliese, Käthe said gently, du musst es lesen. You have to read it. She was right. Anneliese knew she was right. She opened the envelope. Inside a single sheet of paper, typed, official, German efficiency, even in notification of death. She read the first line. The world stopped. Sehr geehrte Frau Vogel, es tut uns leid, Ihnen mitteilen zu müssen, dass Ihr Bruder Klaus Heinrich Vogel, geboren am 3. März 1921 am 28. Juli 1943 bei den Bombenangriffen auf Hamburg verstorben ist. Dear Mrs. Dear Vogel, we regret to inform you that your brother Klaus Heinrich Vogel, born March 3, 1921, died on July 28, 1943, in the bombing raids on Hamburg. July 28, 1943. Anneliese read it again. The date. July 28, 1943. Today was December 18, 1944. Klaus had been dead for 16 months and 21 days. She kept reading, the words blurred. She forced them into focus. Sein Körper wurde in den Trümmern der Blom- und Voss-Werft gefunden. Tod durch Erstickung und Verbrennungen. Er wurde am 15. August 1943 auf dem Friedhof Ohlsdorf beigesetzt. His body was found in the rubble of the Blom and Voss shipyard. Death by asphyxiation and burns. He was buried on August 15, 1943 at Ohlsdorf Cemetery. August 15, 1943. Anneliese had been captured August 15, 1944, exactly 1 year to the day after they buried Klaus. The letter continued, Ihre Mutter, Frau Margarete Vogel, lebt noch, wiegt jedoch nur 41 Kilogramm. Sie bittet Sie, nach Hause zu kommen. Your mother, Mrs. Margarete Vogel, is still alive but weighs only 41 kilograms. She asks that you come home. 41 kilograms, 90 pounds. Her mother weighed 90 pounds. Anneliese weighed 89 pounds. She read the date again, July 28, 1943. Let the timeline sink in. Klaus died July 28, 1943. His last letter to her, June 12, 1943. 6 weeks before he died. Anneliese captured August 15, 1944, 1 year and 18 days after Klaus died. Time in Lorraine starving herself. August 15th through October 10th, 1944. 8 weeks, 56 days, during which Klaus had already been dead for 13 months. The Bacon, October 17th, 1944. Klaus had been dead for 14 months and 20 days. She'd been saving food for a corpse, praying to a ghost, starving herself to honor someone who'd been buried under 3 meters of rubble while she was still free, still working at her radio station in Strasbourg, still receiving his letters and pretending he was alive. The letter fell from her hands. Käthe picked it up. Read it. Her face went pale. Anneliese. Mein Gott. Es tut mir so leid. Anneliese, my God. I'm so sorry. Anneliese didn't cry. Couldn't. The tears were locked somewhere behind the realization that was spreading through her mind like poison. She'd eaten 7 pieces of bacon on October 17, 1944. Klaus had been dead since July 28, 1943. 446 days. She stood, walked to her bunk, pulled out the items stored under her mattress. 16 chocolate bars, 4 apples, 2 of them visibly rotting, bread with green mold, the turkey from Thanksgiving now spoiled, smelling of decay, food saved for a dead man. She'd carried dried soup from Lorraine in a pouch around her neck. For Klaus, who'd been dead. She'd hidden half her rations for 8 weeks in France for Klaus, who'd been dead. She'd wrapped bacon in napkins, toast in handkerchiefs, hoarded apples like treasure. For Klaus, who'd been dead. For Klaus, who'd been dead, who'd died while she was still free, who'd been buried while she was still working, who'd been rotting in Ohlsdorf Cemetery while she was eating 7 pieces of bacon and crying. Because she felt guilty. She'd felt guilty for eating while he starved. But he hadn't been starving. He'd been dead. You can't starve a corpse. You can't save food for ash and bone. You can't balance the universe by refusing meals in honor of someone who was already gone. She'd done it all for nothing. The realization didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one colder than the last. Wave 1, Klaus died in July 1943. Wave 2, I starved myself in Lorraine from August to October 1944. Wave 3, Klaus was already dead when I starved, already dead when I was captured, already dead when I arrived in America. Wave 4, I cried over bacon because I thought I was betraying him. But there was no one to betray, just a grave in Hamburg. Wave 5, I've gained 18 pounds since arriving. Klaus has been dead the entire time. Every pound I gained, he was dead. Every meal I felt guilty about, he was dead. Every moment I thought about him, he'd already been gone for over a year. The waves kept coming. She sat on her bunk, stared at the spoiled food, the chocolate bars that Klaus would never eat, the apples rotting in tribute to a ghost. Kette tried to touch her. She pulled away. Anneliese, es ist nicht deine Schuld. Well, it's not your fault. But it was. Not Klaus's death. She couldn't have prevented that. But the rest of it, the starvation, the guilt, the ritual sacrifice of her own body to honor someone who was beyond honoring. If she'd known in Lorraine that Klaus was already dead, would she have saved those rations? Would she have eaten half her soup and hidden the rest? She would have eaten. She would have survived. She would have weighed more than 71 pounds when she arrived in Norfolk. But she hadn't known. The letter had taken 14 months to reach her. 14 months during which she'd built her entire moral framework around a lie, around the assumption that Klaus was alive, suffering, hungry, and that her suffering somehow balanced his. But suffering doesn't balance, it just spreads. Anneliese looked at the bacon wrapper she'd saved, the one from October 17th. She'd folded it carefully, stored it in her diary, kept it as a reminder of the day her faith began to crack. She unfolded it now. The wax paper was brittle. The smell of bacon, faint, still lingered. She'd eaten this bacon while Klaus was dead. But she'd also eaten this bacon while Klaus had been dead for 14 months. Which meant the bacon hadn't been the betrayal. The betrayal had happened earlier. Or later, or never, because you can't betray the dead. They're beyond betrayal, beyond hunger, beyond the petty concerns of the living who scrambled to assign meaning to suffering. Thaddeus Kruger appeared in the doorway. He'd heard somehow. Camp gossip travelled fast. Fräulein Vogel, he said quietly. Ich habe gehört, es tut mir leid. I heard. I'm sorry. Anneliese looked up at him. This man who'd fed her bacon, who'd told her about his brother Thomas dead at Normandy, who'd said Thomas would want him to live. War bereits tot, she said. Her voice sounded strange, distant, like someone else speaking. Klaus, als ich ankam, als ich den Speck aß, War bereits 16 Monate tot. He was already dead. Klaus, when I arrived, when I ate the bacon, he'd already been dead 16 months. Thaddeus nodded slowly. Ich weiß. I know. Ich habe mich selbst verhungert für einen toten Mann. I starved myself for a dead man. Sie haben es nicht gewusst. You didn't know. Das macht es nicht besser. Das macht es schlimmer. Yeah, that doesn't make it better. That makes it worse. Because knowing Klaus was dead while she ate bacon would have been a betrayal, but not knowing eating bacon while Klaus had been dead for over a year made the whole thing absurd, meaningless. She'd tortured herself over nothing, cried over a moral calculus that had never existed. Thaddeus stepped into the barracks, sat on the bunk across from her, spoke slowly, carefully in his broken German. Krieg macht uns alle verrückt.
Wir halten an Dingen fest, die nicht existieren. Hoffnung, Schuld. Die Idee, dass unser Leiden etwas bedeutet. War makes us all crazy. We hold on to things that don't exist. Hope. Guilt. The idea that our suffering means something. He paused, struggled for words. Ihr Bruder ist tot. Das ist schrecklich. Aber sie sind lebendig, und lebendig zu sein, während andere tot sind, ist keine Sünde. Es ist nur das Leben. Your brother is dead. That is terrible.
But you are alive, and being alive while others are dead is not a sin, it's just life. Anneliese stared at the chocolate bars, the spoiled turkey, the mouldy bread. Ich habe das alles für ihn aufgehoben, she whispered. 16 Schokoladentafeln, und war die ganze Zeit tot. I saved all of this for him. 16 chocolate bars, and he was dead the whole time. Ja. Was mache ich jetzt damit? What do I do with it now? Thaddeus looked at the pile of food, then at her.
Werfen Sie es weg, he said. Es ist verdorben, genau wie die Vergangenheit. Man kann verdorbene Dinge nicht essen. Man kann nur loslassen. Throw it away. It's spoiled, just like the past. You can't eat spoiled things. You can only let go. But letting go meant admitting Klaus was gone. Really gone. Not away, not suffering. Just not. That night, December 18th, 1944, Anneliese Vogel weighed 89 pounds, 1 year and 21 days after her brother had been buried.
She took the chocolate bars, the rotting apples, the mouldy bread, the spoiled turkey, and threw them away. All of it, into the trash barrel outside the barracks. Food saved for a ghost, offerings to the dead. But she kept the bacon wrapper, folded it carefully, placed it back in her diary, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a reminder of the day she learned the cruelest truth of war, that sometimes you survive. And sometimes the people you love don't. And there's no moral to that story. No lesson, no balance, no fairness, just the fact of it. Hard and cold and permanent. Klaus was dead, she was alive, and tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. they would serve breakfast, probably eggs, probably bacon, and she would eat it, not for Klaus. He was beyond hunger, not for Germany, it was beyond saving, for herself. Because the dead don't need the living to starve, they just need to be remembered. And Anneliese would remember every day, for the rest of her life, whether that life lasted 1 more year or 50. She would remember the boy who stood in front of the Blohm and Voss shipyard in 1942, proud to serve, believing in victory, writing letters to his sister. She would remember the man who died July 28, 1943, at age 22 years, 4 months, and 25 days. Buried August 15th. Mourned too late. And she would remember the bacon, 7 strips, the best thing she'd tasted in 5 years, eaten while Klaus had been dead for over a year. And somehow, impossibly, that made it both more terrible and more necessary. To live when others died, to eat when others had starved, to survive when survival felt like the cruelest punishment. That was war, and Anneliese Vogel had just learned that no amount of bacon could make it taste like anything but ash. December 18th, 1944 through June 1946, 18 months. The months that followed the letter blurred together like watercolors in rain. Anneliese ate. She gained weight. The numbers on the scale climbed with mechanical inevitability. 89 pounds, 93, 97, 102. By March 1945, she weighed 106 pounds, 35 pounds more than when she'd arrived. 35 pounds gained while Klaus had been dead. The war ended, May 8, 1945, VE Day. The other prisoners celebrated quietly. Some cried with relief. Others sat in stunned silence. Anneliese felt nothing. The war had ended for her in a different way, on a different day. July 28, 1943. The day Klaus died. Everything after was just aftermath. She stopped saving food, threw away the hidden chocolate bars, the hoarded bread, ate what was given. Not with pleasure, not with guilt, just ate, mechanically. The way machines consumed fuel. Thaddeus Kruger noticed the change. He still checked on her, but now his eyes held something that looked like concern, or maybe pity. She couldn't tell anymore. Didn't care. "You eating okay, Miss Vogel?" he asked one morning in April, his German rusty, from months of her not responding. "Ja," she said. "Yes, that was all. Just yes." No elaboration, no conversation. He nodded, walked away. What else was there to say? The camp became a holding facility. Plans for repatriation, paperwork, medical clearances. The women would return home. To what exactly, no one seemed sure. Germany was rubble. Cities destroyed. Millions dead, but it was home. Or what remained of it. On June 10th, 1946, Anneliese received her repatriation papers. She would leave June 15th, 5 days. June 14th, the day before departure, Thaddeus found her in the barracks. He was holding a small box. "Fräulein Vogel," he said, "für Ihre Reise." "For your journey." She opened it. Inside, 6 cans of bacon, American field rations, and 3 Hershey chocolate bars. "Für Ihre Mutter," he said, "for your mother." Anneliese stared at the bacon cans, at the chocolate, at this man who'd fed her when she was dying, who'd told her his brother would want her to live, who was now giving her food to take home. "Warum?" Why? Thaddeus smiled. Sad. Tired. Weil Krieg zu viel nimmt. Vielleicht kann Essen ein bisschen zurückgeben. Because what takes too much, maybe food can give a little back. He paused, switched to English. The translator wasn't there, but Anneliese understood enough now. "My brother Thomas died so people like you could live, Miss Vogel. Not so you could carry guilt until it killed you. Your brother Klaus, I didn't know him, but I know war. And I know that the dead don't want the living to become dead too. They just want to be remembered." He placed his hand over his heart. "Ich werde Sie erinnern." "Und Sie erinnern Klaus." "I will remember you, and you remember Klaus." Anneliese's eyes burned. She hadn't cried since December 18th, since the letter. But now, holding bacon cans and chocolate with this enemy who'd shown her more kindness than her own country ever had, the tears came. "Danke," she whispered. "Thank you," Thaddeus nodded, turned to leave, stopped at the door. "Miss Vogel, one more thing. In my family we have a saying, the best way to honor the dead is to live well. Maybe you try that for Klaus." Then he was gone. That night Anneliese packed the diary, the photograph of Klaus, the bacon wrapper from October 17th, 1944, and now 6 cans of bacon and 3 chocolate bars. She weighed 106 pounds. Klaus had weighed, she didn't know, couldn't know. He was ash now. Ash had no weight. June 15th through July 3rd, 1946. The voyage home. The ship was crowded. Hundreds of German POWs, all going back to a country they barely recognized. The women from Fort Sam Houston stayed together. 47 had arrived, 47 returned. But they weren't the same women. Keta sat with Annalisa on the deck one evening, watching the sun set over the Atlantic. The same ocean they'd crossed 2 years ago. Different direction now. Was wirst du tun? Keta asked. What will you do? Ich weiß nicht, Annalisa said. I don't know. Deine Mutter wiegt 90 Pfund, ich wiege 106. Wie erkläre ich das? Weighs 90 pounds. I weigh 106. How do I explain that? Keta was quiet. Then, du erklärst es nicht. Du lebst einfach. Für sie. Für Klaus. Für dich. You don't explain. You just live. For her. For Klaus. For yourself. But living felt like the hardest thing Annalisa had ever been asked to do. The ship docked at Bremerhaven July 3rd, 1946. Germany smelled different. Smoke. Not the productive smoke of American factories. The smoke of destruction. Of things that had burned and never been rebuilt. The British processed them quickly. Medical checks, interrogation about what they'd seen in America. Annalisa answered truthfully. They built 3 bombers per day. They had more food than Germany would see in 10 years. They treated prisoners better than Germany treated its own soldiers. The interrogator, a British captain, wrote it all down. Looked at her. You believe that? About the treatment. Ich habe es gesehen, Annalisa said. I saw it. He nodded, stamped her papers. You're free to go. Free. The word meant nothing. Klaus wasn't free, he was dead. And she was carrying bacon to a mother who was starving. What kind of freedom was that? July 8th, 1946. Hamburg. The train ride from Bremerhaven took 6 hours. Should have taken 3, but the tracks were damaged. Bombed. They had to detour twice. Through the window, Annalisa saw Germany. Her Germany, except it wasn't. Cities were skeletons, factories were ruins. Every station they passed showed the same thing: rubble, ash, people in rags searching through debris. Hamburg appeared through the smoke, or what remained of Hamburg. The station was half destroyed. The platforms cracked, but it functioned, barely. Annalisa stepped off the train carrying one small bag. Inside, the diary, the photograph, the bacon, the chocolate, everything she owned in the world. She knew where her mother lived, or had lived. Altona district, if the building was still standing. She walked. The streets were barely recognizable, entire blocks gone, replaced by craters, by makeshift shelters made from rubble, by people who looked more like ghosts than humans. A woman, maybe 40 but looking 60, sat on broken concrete. Her dress was rags, her face hollow. She held a sign, Brot für Arbeit. Bread for work. Annalisa kept walking. Because if she stopped, if she looked too closely, she would see Klaus in every face, every starving person, every ghost. Altona district. Miracle of miracles, her mother's building still stood. Damaged, windows broken, half the roof missing, but standing. 3rd floor, apartment 3C. The door was unlocked. No point in locks when there was nothing to steal. Annalise pushed it open. Mama! A sound. Movement from the corner. A figure on a cot. Thin. So thin. Annalise. Her mother's voice. Margaret Vogel. 56 years old. Looking 80, Annalisa crossed the room. Stopped. Stared. Her mother weighed 90 pounds. The letter had said 90. But seeing it was different. Her mother's face was a skull. Her arms were sticks. Her dress hung off her like a burial shroud. Mama, Annalise whispered. Margaret struggled to sit. Failed. Lay back, smiled. a smile that showed too many teeth, not enough flesh. Du bist nach Hause gekommen. You came home. Ja, Mama. Du siehst gesund aus. You look healthy. Healthy. 106 pounds, 35 pounds more than her mother, gained in America, while her mother starved in Hamburg, while Klaus rotted in Ohlsdorf Cemetery. Anneliese wanted to scream, wanted to tear the flesh from her own bones and give it to her mother, wanted to undo every meal she'd eaten, every pound she'd gained. Instead, she opened her bag, pulled out the chocolate bars. Ich habe etwas für dich. I have something for you. She unwrapped one, broke off a piece, held it to her mother's lips. Margaretta's eyes filled with tears. Schokolade, she whispered. Chocolate. Ich habe seit 1942. Well, hast du? I haven't since 1942. Where did you? America. Her mother ate the piece slowly, closed her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks into the hollows where flesh used to be. Es ist so gut, she whispered. It's so good. Anneliese watched her mother eat chocolate, watched her cry, watched her savor something Anneliese had taken for granted for 18 months. And the guilt which she'd thought had reached its peak found new depths, because her mother weighed 90 pounds and was crying over chocolate. And Anneliese weighed 106 and had thrown away chocolate bars because she couldn't carry them all. That night in the ruined apartment, Anneliese wrote in her diary, 8th of July, 1946, Ich bin nach Hause gekommen. Mama wiegt 90 Pfund. Ich wiege 106. Ich gab ihr Schokolade und sie weinte. Ich verstehe jetzt. Es gibt keine Vergebung für das, was ich getan habe. Nicht, weil ich Klaus verraten habe, er war bereits tot, sondern weil ich lebte, während sie starb. Alle von ihnen. Mama, Klaus, Deutschland. Und ich wurde fett in Texas. July 8th, 1946. I came home. Mama weighs 90 pounds. I weigh 106. I gave her chocolate and she cried. I understand now. There is no forgiveness for what I did. Not because I betrayed Klaus, he was already dead, but because I lived while they died, all of them, Mama, Klaus, Germany, and I got fat in Texas. July 1946 through December 1950. 4.5 years, Anneliese found work with the British Occupation Forces, translator, secretary. The skills that had made her valuable to Wehrmacht, signals intelligence made her valuable to the victors too. The pay was decent, enough to buy food on the black market, enough to feed herself and her mother. Barely. She moved in with Margaret. The apartment had 2 rooms, both cold, both damaged, but it was home, or the memory of home. Every day Anneliese worked. Every night she came home with whatever food she could find, bread, potatoes, sometimes rarely meat. She gave most of it to her mother. Margaret gained weight slowly, 90 pounds to 95, then 100. By 1947 she weighed 105 pounds, almost as much as Anneliese, who'd stabilized at 107. They never talked about Klaus, not directly. His photograph sat on the small table, watching them, accusing them. The boy who'd died at 22 while his sister got fat in America and his mother starved in Hamburg. But once a year, July 28th, Anneliese didn't eat, not a single bite. From sunrise to sunset, she fasted for Klaus. And once a year, October 17th, she didn't eat. The anniversary of the bacon. The day she'd chosen life over loyalty. Her mother noticed, never commented, just watched, with eyes that understood too much. In 1949, Margaret got sick, tuberculosis, the disease of poverty, of malnutrition, of bodies too weak to fight. The British Occupation Hospital did what they could, antibiotics, rest, food, but TB doesn't care about medicine when the body it's attacking has been starving for 6 years. Margaret died January 3rd, 1950. 3 days into the new decade, She was 58 years old, weighed 92 pounds at death. 3 years of adequate food hadn't been enough to undo 6 years of starvation. Her last words whispered to Anneliese, while Anneliese held her hand. Wer gibt dir selbst, Anneliese? Klaus hätte das gewollt. Ich will das. Bitte, vergib dir. Forgive yourself, Anneliese. Klaus would have wanted that. I want that, please. Forgive yourself. Anneliese couldn't speak, couldn't promise, because forgiveness required believing she deserved it. And she didn't. After the funeral, Anneliese returned to the apartment, alone now, just her and Klaus's photograph. She kept working, kept eating, kept living, because stopping would require a decision, and decisions required caring, and caring hurt too much. January 1950 through July 1952. 2.5 years alone. The apartment became a tomb. Anneliese went to work, came home, ate mechanically, slept badly, repeated. She had no friends, no interests, no future. Just routine. The routine of survival without purpose. The diary sat in a drawer. She wrote in it sporadically, once a month, then once every few months. The entries grew shorter, more sparse. 15th of March 1950. Mama ist tot. Ich bin allein. Ich weiß nicht, warum ich weitermache. March 15th, 1950. Mama is dead. I am alone. I don't know why I continue. 23rd August 1950. Heute 7 Jahre seit Klaus starb. Ich bin 34. Ist für immer 22. Das ist nicht richtig. August 23rd, 1950. Today is 7 years since Klaus died. I am 34. He is forever 22. This is not right. 17th of October 1951. Der Specktag. Ich aß heute nicht. Ich werde nie wieder vergessen. October 17th, 1951. Bacon Day. I didn't eat today. I will never forget. The bacon wrapper, the one from October 17th, 1944, sat in the diary. After 8 years, it still smelled faintly of salt and smoke, a ghost of abundance, a reminder of the day everything broke. Anneliese turned 36 in March 1952, celebrated by going to work, coming home, eating bread and cheese, alone. In June, something changed. Or maybe nothing changed and that was the problem. She realized she'd been alive for 9 years since Klaus died. 9 years of eating, breathing, working, existing. For what Klaus was dead? Her mother was dead. Germany was divided. The war was over. The world had moved on, but Anneliese was stuck. Frozen in October 1944, in a mess hall in Texas, eating bacon while her brother rotted. On July 20th, 1952, she stopped going to work, called in sick, stayed in the apartment. On July 22nd, she pulled out the diary, read it from beginning to end. 143 pages, 8 years of guilt compressed into leather and ink. On July 23rd, she made a decision. July 24th, 1952. The final entry. Anneliese sat at the small table. Klaus's photograph watched her. She'd turned 36. He'd been 22. Forever 22. She opened the diary to a blank page, the last blank page, page 143. She picked up her pen, the same pen she'd used in Lorraine, in Norfolk, in Texas, in Hamburg, the pen that had recorded her transformation from soldier to prisoner to survivor to this. She wrote slowly, carefully. The words mattered. They would be the last words she ever wrote. 24. Juli 1952. Heute ist es 9 Jahre her, seit Klaus starb. Er war 22 Jahre, 4 Monate und 25 Tage alt. Ich bin jetzt 36. Ich habe ihn 14 Jahre überlebt. Das ist 14 Jahre zu viel. Ich habe versucht zu leben, wie Mama sagte. Ich habe versucht, mir zu vergeben, wie Sergeant Kruger sagte. Ich habe versucht, den Speck zu vergessen, die Schokolade, das Gewicht, das ich gewann, während Klaus starb. Aber Vergebung ist eine Lüge, die die Lebenden sich erzählen. Die Wahrheit ist, ich aß 7 Scheiben Speck am 17. Oktober 1944, während mein Bruder seit 14 Monaten und 20 Tagen unter Schutt lag. Ich gewann 35 Pfund, während meine Mutter verhungerte. Ich schlief in einem warmen Bett, während Deutschland brannte. Die Amerikaner haben mich nicht getötet. Ihre Freundlichkeit hat mich getötet. Wenn sie grausam gewesen wären, hätte ich überlebt. Ich hätte gehasst. Hass ist einfach. Hass gibt Kraft. Aber sie waren freundlich. Sergeant Kruger gab mir Speck mit einem Lächeln. Er sprach meine Sprache. Er erzählte mir von seinem toten Bruder. Er machte mich menschlich. Und das konnte ich nicht ertragen. Denn wenn der Feind ein Monster ist, kann man kämpfen. Aber wenn der Feind ein Mensch ist, ein freundlicher Mensch, der seinen Bruder verloren hat, genau wie du, was bedeutet das für den Krieg? Für die Propaganda, für alles, wofür wir kämpften? Es bedeutet, dass wir die Monster waren, nicht sie, wir. Morgen gehe ich zu Klaus und zu Mama. Vielleicht kann ich ihnen dort die Wahrheit sagen, die ich nie sagen konnte. Es tut mir leid, dass ich gelebt habe. Es tut mir leid, dass ich den Speck aß. Es tut mir leid, dass ich schwach war. Es tut mir leid, wer auch immer dieses Tagebuch findet, das ist die wahre Kosten des Krieges, nicht die Toten auf den Schlachtfeldern, sondern die Lebenden, die wünschen, sie wären tot. Die Menschen, die überlebten, nur um zu entdecken, dass Überleben die schwerste Strafe war. Der einzige Trost, den ich habe, ist das, was Sergeant Kruger mir sagte. Wir sind nur Menschen. Er hatte recht. Wir sind nur Menschen. Deutsche, Amerikaner, alle nur Menschen. Nur. Und manchmal ist das das Schlimmste, was man sein kann, weil Menschen leiden, Menschen fühlen Schuld, Menschen können sich nicht vergeben, Monster könnten weitermachen, aber Menschen brechen. Ich bin gebrochen. Ich war gebrochen, seit ich den ersten Bissen Speck nahm und merkte, dass er gut schmeckte. Anneliese Vogel. Geboren 12. März 1916. Hamburg gestorben. Morgen PS. Ich habe das Wachspapier vom Speck aufbewahrt. Nach 8 Jahren riecht es immer noch nach Salz und Rauch. Ich weiß nicht, ob das eine Erinnerung ist, die ich verdiene, aber es ist die einzige Erinnerung, die ich habe an den Moment, als mein Glaube starb und ich lernte, dass Freundlichkeit die grausamste Waffe ist. She closed the diary, placed it on the table. Next to it, the photograph of Klaus, the bacon wrapper, the letter from the Red Cross. From her work desk, she pulled out a bottle, sleeping pills, barbiturates. She'd been saving them. 1 pill every few weeks from the occupation hospital. They gave them freely for insomnia. 40 pills, more than enough. She took the diary, the photograph, the bacon wrapper, the letter, placed them in the metal ammunition box she'd bought from a flea market, German army surplus, like the one that had carried maps and orders during the war. Now it would carry her story. She sealed the box, walked to the damaged wall in the apartment, the one with the hole from the bombing, the one she'd covered with a board. She pried the board loose, placed the box deep inside the wall cavity, between the supports, where it would stay hidden for years, decades, until someone tore down the building and found it, if anyone found it. She replaced the board, hammered it back into place, then she returned to the table, poured water into a glass, opened the pill bottle. July 25th, 1952, 3:17 a.m. Anneliese Vogel swallowed the first pill, then the second. By the 10th, her hands were shaking. By the 20th, her vision blurred. By the 30th, she could barely lift the glass. She swallowed the 40th pill, set down the glass, lay on the cot, The same cot her mother had died on. The room spun. Darkness crept in from the edges. Her last thought wasn't of Klaus, wasn't of her mother, wasn't even of the bacon. It was of Thaddeus Kruger, standing in the barracks, telling her, "We're only human." He'd been right. They were only human. And sometimes being human hurt too much. The darkness took her. July 26, 1952. Hamburg Police Report. Body discovered, Anneliese Vogel, female, 36 years. Cause of death, barbiturate overdose. Ruled suicide, no known relatives. Effects minimal. One photograph, male, approximately 22 to 25 years, believed to be brother, no note found. Burial, Ohlsdorf Cemetery, Section G, Plot 247, Pauper's Grave. Service none requested. Case closed. What the police didn't find: the diary, the bacon wrapper, the box hidden in the wall. Those would wait. 49 years. Until a sledgehammer struck a wall on November the 14th, 2001. November the 14th, 2001. Hamburg Historical Museum. Dr. Helena Brandt, curator, turned the diary pages with gloved hands. Werner Richter, the foreman who'd found it, sat across from her. "You understand what this is?" she asked. "Old diary," Werner said. "German woman, war prisoner." "More than that," Helena pointed to the bacon wrapper. "This is
Extraordinary, the preservation, the detail, the story." She looked up. "This is history, living history." Over the next 3 months, the museum worked to verify Anneliese's account. U.S. National Archives, prisoner of war records confirmed. Anneliese Vogel, Obergefreite, captured August 15, 1944. Arrived Fort Sam, Houston, Texas, October 14, 1944. Weight on arrival 71 pounds. Weight on departure 106 pounds. Repatriated June 15, 1946. Hamburg City Records. Klaus Heinrich Vogel, born March 3, 1921. Killed in Operation Gomorrah bombing, July 28, 1943. Buried Ohlsdorf Cemetery, August 15, 1943. Hamburg. Death records. Margareta Vogel died January 3, 1950. Anneliese Vogel died July 25, 1952. Suicide. Both buried Ohlsdorf Cemetery. The bacon wrapper was tested. 1940s American military wax paper. Traces of pork fat. Age approximately 57 years. Everything checked out. But one question remained. Who was Sergeant Kruger? February 2002. San Antonio, Texas. Dr. Brandt flew to Texas. Fort Sam, Houston had records. Staff Sergeant Thaddeus Kruger. Service 1942 to 1946. Brother Thomas Kruger killed Normandy June 7, 1944. Discharged honorably July 1946. Last known address, San Antonio, Texas. The trail went cold. Thaddeus Kruger had died in 1987. No obituary, no family listed. But Dr. Brandt was persistent. She checked cemetery records, found his grave. Mount Zion Cemetery, San Antonio. And next to his name, listed as next of kin, Margaret Kruger, granddaughter. It took 2 weeks to find her. Margaret Kruger, 68 years old, living in the same house her grandfather had owned. Dr. Brandt knocked on the door. The woman who answered had kind eyes, brown eyes, like her grandfather. "Mrs. Kruger, my name is Dr. Helena Brandt. I'm from Hamburg Historical Museum. I'm trying to learn about your grandfather, Thaddeus Kruger." Margaret's eyes widened. "Grandpa Thad, why?" "Because Dr. Brandt said gently, "he saved a woman's life, and she wrote about him, and I think you should read what she wrote." They sat in Margaret's living room. Dr. Brandt showed her photocopies of the diary, the bacon scene, Thaddeus's words. "Your brother would want you to live." Margaret cried. "He talked about her," Margaret said. "Not often, but sometimes he called her the sad German lady. Said she was the saddest person he'd ever tried to help." She wiped her eyes.
He died in 1989, not 1987. I was there. He was 85. At the end he was confused. Kept asking if Annalisa had made it home. If she was okay. She made it home, Dr. Brandt said quietly. But she wasn't okay. Margaret looked at the diary excerpts, at the final entry. She killed herself. Yes, 1952. She couldn't forgive herself for surviving. That's... Margaret shook her head. That's what Grandpa was afraid of. He said he tried to tell her it wasn't her fault. That war was the enemy, not her. But he didn't think she believed him. She stood, went to a closet, came back with a shoebox. Grandpa's things from the war. I never looked through them much, but maybe. She opened the box. Inside, medals, photographs, letters. And at the bottom, a piece of paper, folded, yellowed. Margaret unfolded it, read. Her hands shook. Oh my God. Geek. What? Margaret handed it over. It was a letter, written in English, dated October the 20th, 1944. Dear Thomas, I met a German prisoner today. A woman, Annalise, she weighs 71 pounds and is dying of starvation, but that's not what's killing her. What's killing her is guilt. She saved food for her brother Klaus. Starved herself to save rations for him. I gave her bacon this morning. 7 pieces. She cried while eating it because she felt like she was betraying him. I told her about you.
How you died at Normandy, how I felt guilty for living. I don't know if it helped. But Thomas, if you can hear me wherever you are, tell Klaus if he's there too that his sister needs to live. Tell him to forgive her for the bacon. Tell him that surviving isn't betrayal, because I think if she doesn't learn that she's going to die, not from starvation, from grief. And I don't want that to happen. Your brother, Thad. Dr. Brandt stared at the letter. At the date, October 20th, 1944. 3 days after the bacon scene, Thaddeus had written to his dead brother, asking him to tell Klaus to forgive Annalisa. 2 dead men, 2 living siblings, all trying to forgive themselves for surviving. Can I... Dr. Brandt's voice cracked. Can I make a copy of this for the exhibition? Margaret nodded. Yes, yes. Grandpa would want people to know. He'd want Annalisa to be remembered. April 15th, 2002, Hamburg Historical Museum, opening night. The exhibition was called Das Speck-Tagebuch, eine Geschichte von Krieg und Freundlichkeit. The Bacon Diary, a story of war and kindness, the centerpiece. The diary itself opened to the final entry. Next to it, in a climate-controlled case, the bacon wrapper. After 58 years, it still carried a faint smell. Visitors leaned close. Some recoiled. Some cried. The wall text read, Annalisa Vogel weighed 71 pounds when she arrived in America October 1944, 106 pounds when she left June 1946. She gained 35 pounds of weight, but she lost something that no amount of food could restore the ability to forgive herself for surviving. Klaus Vogel died July 28, 1943, age 22. Annalisa didn't learn of his death until December 18, 1944, 16 months later. During those 16 months, she starved herself, saving food for a brother who was already dead. On October 17, 1944, Staff Sergeant Thaddeus Kruger gave her 7 pieces of bacon. It was the best thing she'd tasted in 5 years. It was also, in her mind, the ultimate betrayal. She never forgave herself. She survived the war. She couldn't survive the peace. Annalisa Vogel, 1916 to 1952. Killed not by bombs, but by kindness. Next to the display, Thaddeus's letter to Thomas, and a photograph of Thaddeus, 1944, in his sergeant's uniform. Kind eyes, brown eyes. The exhibition ran for 6 months, over 100,000 visitors. It became one of the most visited exhibitions in the museum's history. People came for the history, they stayed for the humanity, and they left understanding something they'd never understood before.
That war's cruelest weapon isn't hatred, it's kindness given to those who believe they don't deserve it.